My name is Carol McCoy. Today is August 7th, 2023. We are at the Nashville Bar Association on 4th Avenue North in Nashville, Tennessee. This interview is being conducted for the Legal History Project of the Nashville Bar Association, and it's my pleasure to welcome our guest today. Would you please tell us your full name and your date and place of birth?
My full name is Denise Billye Bowers Fanders, and I was born in 1952 in Louisville, Kentucky.
Would you tell us a little bit about your family background, starting with your grandparents and then your parents?
Well, on my father's side, my grandfather was Joseph William Bowers, and he was the executive director of the YMCA in Orange, New Jersey. He was an athlete, first African-American to play lacrosse in college, at Springfield College. And he was also a hockey player. And my grandmother was Grace Primus Bowers. And they were the parents of 3 sons, one of whom was my father.
And was your grandfather on your father's side a minister?
He was also a minister, yes.
Presbyterian?
Yes.
And then on your mother's side, who were your grandparents?
On my mother's side, my grandmother was Carrie Elizabeth Hampton Hatchett. And my grandfather was Leon Hampton. I didn't know my grandparents on my mother's side. They were both deceased when I was born, but my grandmother was a seamstress, and I'm not sure what my grandfather's profession was.
With regards to your parents, tell us a little bit about your parents' background, where they were born, when they were born, what kind of enterprise did they undertake? If your mother worked at home, that's fine. If she was out in the community, we want to know about your father too. And
My mother was Margaret Hampton Bowers, and she was a librarian. She went to Wilberforce to undergraduate school, and then she got a degree in library science at Hampton University. She later studied at Columbia University, and she was a very active civic person. She worked, she actually worked in the library before she got married. And then after she married my father, she was working at the Western Branch Library. But back then, once you started showing when you were pregnant, you could not continue to work. So she left outside employment and she became a full-time mother, which she continued to do until my oldest sister, was ready to go to college. And I was about in the 6th grade when she went back to work.
now, when was she born?
She was born, I can't tell you when she was born because she never told anybody when she was born. I know the answer to that question, but we didn't even
share.
I'm not sharing.
That's now, part of what you said is she went back after you were in the 6th grade being a librarian, but you also mentioned the word activist.
Oh, yes, she was always dealing with issues in the community. She was always up in the mayor's office. We called her the mayor of the Russell area, which was the area of town that we lived in. And she was always proactive about issues that were going on.
And president of PTA.
She was president of the PTA of the elementary school that I went to, and she was always very involved in our
What were her
role. Well, she belonged to a bridge club. She was in sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha. She my father and my mother were both very social. They went to a lot of parties, formal dances, and
Did they have political involvement?
well, yeah, I mean, they always encouraged us to vote. I mean, I registered to vote as soon as I turned 18, and they always encouraged us to do that. And yeah, they were somewhat active in local politics.
I know that
Not to run for office.
I know you mentioned Jack and Jill.
Yeah, Jack and Jill is another organization that of mothers that provided cultural and social and civic opportunities for their children. We grew up in the Jim Crow South in Louisville, so things were segregated. And our parents protected us from the humiliation of segregation by providing social activities within our community. And so sometimes Jack and Jill, for example, would rent, well, they would have the museum open on a day when it was closed to other people, so that we could, see exhibits or even go to the movies at a theater that wouldn't normally be open to Black people.
And your father?
My father was an accountant.
What's his name?
His name is Joseph. He's deceased. Joseph Primus Bowers.
And when was he born?
He was born in 1919, and
Whereabouts?
he was born in Orange, New Jersey, and he was a math major. He went to Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he was a veteran of the U.S. Army. He was stationed in Tuskegee and in Fort Knox, and it was when he was stationed at Fort Knox that he met my mother. He was the business manager for the Louisville Defender, which was the African-American newspaper in Louisville. He also taught math at Davis Trade School. He worked at Indiana Arsenal. I'm not sure what he did there, but he ultimately ended up in the Louisville Post Office. He was highly qualified, but because of the time that we lived in, he had to start out sorting mail, but he ultimately ended up being the director of the accounting department. And he was the one who was in charge of their instituting computers at the post office for the first time. I remember him getting up late at night, computers were down, and running out of the post office to make sure they were back up.
You probably were familiar with the computers before they became a big thing in people's schools and in their homes.
Yeah, I was aware that they existed, but you might recall that they were like really big then, like the size of a piano. And you had punch cards. So people didn't have computers in their homes.
Did he have his own business?
Yes, he also had his own business. He was an accountant and bookkeeper for a lot of small businesses in Louisville, and he also prepared income taxes for individuals.
I know you mentioned the Allen Hotel.
Yes, he was the bookkeeper. That was one of his clients, the Allen Hotel. The Allen Hotel was an African-American owned hotel, which was on was in the Green Book. Many people have heard of the Green Book, which is
For those who haven't, explain what the Green Book was. There's a movie about it, but not everybody has seen it.
well, back in the days of Jim Crow, Black people couldn't stay in hotels. We couldn't eat in a lot of restaurants. So the Green Book was a source for Black people who were traveling to know where they could stop, where they could eat, and where they could go to a hotel. And if you were plotting your travel, you wanted to know, how far you could go for the next stop, or if you had to spend the night somewhere, you needed to figure that out before you left. And the Green Book was a source of that. When I was little, I didn't remember the Green Book, but my sister Jamar said she remembers Daddy opening the Green Book when we traveled before we left, and plotting out our course so that we would have the appropriate places to stop along the way.
Well, you mentioned a little bit of the activities your mother did. What type of activities did your father like?
Oh, he worked a lot. But he was an athlete. When he was in college, he was a star basketball player. And so he liked, to engage us in sports. He taught me how to bat a ball. And he taught my brother a lot of things. My brother was an athlete as well. And he enjoyed family activities. He liked to play cards, and he was an excellent bid whist player. And he liked to spend time with his family.
And again, you mentioned that your parents were very social.
Yes.
Went to club dances.
Well, there were various social clubs in Louisville, and so even clubs that they weren't members of, people would invite them to the parties that these various clubs had.
when it came to religion, did he follow in anybody's footsteps?
Well, he did not, he was not a minister, but he was a very spiritual person. He taught Sunday school at our church, Plymouth Congregational Church, which later became Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ. And he taught the men's Bible class. He was a trustee at the church. So he was very actively involved, as well as my mother. My mother was very active in the church too. She was a deaconess, and as a matter of fact, my mother was born Episcopalian and he was a Presbyterian, and they decided to go to a different church when they got married. So they joined the Congregational Church, and that's where they raised us.
I think you were telling me about some of the activities, and on one occasion, you explained that in Louisville at the time, when you went to see the movie The Ten Commandments, that again, it was split seating. And that was something that was new to me when I came to Nashville, that they had a different place for African Americans to sit than they did for white people.
That is correct. As a matter of fact, the first movie that I attended as a child was The Ten Commandments. And we had to sit in the balcony.
Was that in Louisville?
That was a rule.
Then, as we kind of talk about your parents, there were several things that you said about the Derby Day.
Oh, yes. Many of people know that Louisville is the home of the Kentucky Derby, and that's a big deal in Louisville for everybody. And people would always have guests to come from out of town, and people had a lot of house parties. And even if you didn't go to the racetrack, it was a big celebration time. We called it Old Home Week because people who had lived there before would come home. It's like a big reunion. And my parents belonged to a club that was it was a Derby club. All they did, the only purpose was to have a party on the Saturday evening of Derby Day.
But tell me about your siblings.
Well, I have 3 siblings. I'm the youngest of 4. My oldest sister is Carrie Bowers Jones, and my brother is Joseph Hampton Bowers.
Now,
And my
Carrie was born in 46.
well, I'm not telling their ages either.
Oh, right. I won't ask you that then. I'm sorry to interrupt. My brother is.
And my brother's Joseph Hampton Bowers. He's a retired periodontist in Albuquerque. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'll go back to my older sister, Carrie Jones. She's a retired educator. She was a homemaker for many years, and then she's a retired educator. And she is also a civic activist, following the footsteps of my mother. She's in Louisville now. She's lived a lot of different places over her lifetime. Her husband, was like kind of in corporate America, so they moved a lot. But my other sister, Jamar Bowers Mizell, is retired. She's in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She's an interior decorator. She's she's worked in HR. She's also done small business development, but she's an artist, and she's also a civic leader as well.
Very good. Let's kind of go through your childhood now.
Okay.
I think you've mentioned a little bit about growing up in Louisville. Tell me about the community, some of your childhood friends. What type of activities did you do for recreation?
Well, we did a lot of things. My sisters and I went to public school. My sister and brothers and I, we all went to public schools. And we went to neighborhood schools. We walked to school. My sisters and I attended dancing school, Jewel McNary dancing school, and that was really fun. We did ballet, we did tap, we did toe dancing, and we had very elaborate costumes for our dance recitals. So that was always fun. I have, a lot of friends from childhood, friends of that, we just grew up. Some were in our neighborhood, and some were friends we had through social organizations, a lot of people from church. We had a lot of activities at church, a lot of social activities at church. We sang in the choir. We had another musical group that sang show tunes. We also did plays and just had picnics and different things that we did. So there was a park around the corner from where we lived. We'd go swimming there. So it was we had a good.
And what life sports did you get into?
Well,
your dad was involved.
Yeah, my dad. I was not very good at ball, but that's why I had to have him give me private lessons. But I was a cheerleader back then. That was before Title IX, and before a lot of women were involved in sports, and women did half court basketball. I was on the tumbling team. I was a cheerleader, and
What was your elementary?
my elementary was W.H. Perry Elementary School.
And your junior high?
Was Russell Junior High School, Harvey C. Russell Junior High School.
And then
Then I went to Central High School for high school.
and at that time, were the schools integrated?
Well, by the time I was in high school, schools were integrated. The school in elementary school, it was not integrated. Junior high, it was not. We had a few white teachers in junior high. And then in high school, it was, but I went to the traditionally predominantly Black school in Louisville. So we had some white teachers, but there were very few white students. But there were Black students going to the traditionally white schools in Louisville. Now, I will say that they also had segregated basketball teams. There was and sports teams. At one time, the Black schools did not play the white schools. As a matter of fact, my school, Central High School, before my time, used to come to Nashville to a tournament at TSU where they would play Pearl and other schools from the South, other Black schools from the South. But by the time I was in high school, we did play the other white schools. And my high school, Central High, won the state basketball champion for the first time since it was in the integrated league. When I was a junior in high school, that would have been in I graduated in 70, so it would have probably been 69. So that was a big deal. I mean, it was a really big deal, and I was excited to be a cheerleader in those circumstances because we had so much fun. I mean, the mayor gave us keys to the city. It was really an exciting time.
And did you have any little jobs while you were in high school?
Well, yes, my first job was a page in the library. I wasn't the page in my mother's library, but one of her friends gave me a job. And yeah, so that was fun.
And then in high school, what did you do?
In high school, I was involved in a lot of activities. I was in the Red Cross. As I said, I was a cheerleader. I was on the school newspaper. I participated in the Model UN. I was in the High Y Club where we did mock state government, and we went to the Kentucky state legislature and had a mock government where we had, the governor and the speaker of the house and all that sort of thing. And so all of those things were enriching and fun.
And I think you told me that at the time you were going to high school, most of your teachers had master's degrees.
Most of them did, because back then, a lot of highly educated, qualified people were teachers because they couldn't get jobs other places. They couldn't get jobs in corporate America or whatever. So we had outstanding teachers. In fact, a lot of the teachers went to my church. And so I was surrounded by excellence. In fact, my mother used to make us, she was an English major in college. She used to make us put a penny in a jar when we spoke incorrect English. And so I listened to people who were educated and who were always correcting us and making us use proper grammar. So as I said, we were surrounded by excellence.
I remember that you mentioned a typing teacher.
Yes, my typing teacher, Miss Billye, she was one of my favorites. I had many favorite teachers, but she was always one of excellence. And I mean, you know, they kept their classes in order. I can remember an occasion when, well, I'll skip that story.
Well, let's move on to college. Now, did you, when you were in high school, did you have a summer work experience? Or mostly just do activities that kids do, travel and things like that with your parents?
In college, well, one other thing.
And this is in high school.
In high school. Well, in high school, we traveled. I mean, ever since I was in, you know, elementary school, our family traveled in the summer. We would usually go on a vacation, on a driving trip. And one of the things that was distinctive about my father, again, because of the time, he always wore a suit and tie. He did not walk out of the house without a suit and tie. And that was one of the ways he protected himself against police brutality. When we drove on a trip, he always had a collared shirt on. It might be a sports shirt, but he had a tie on the seat. So if we got stopped, he would put the tie on. But that's the kind of, you know, that's the way it was in the Jim Crow South. You always had to be concerned about how you were going to be treated.
And I think you said that when you would travel, you had not only used the green book, but you always knew where you were going to stay. And frequently it was with either family or friends.
Right. My parents knew somebody everywhere. And I asked them, how did they know people in every city that we went to? And they said they were friends of ours in college. They went to HBCUs, which means historically Black universities. And there's a bond that was created there. And we would go to a city and they just call somebody that they were in school with, and we would often stay with them. But that's how we had to do, that's what the Black community had to do in general. We knew people, and people opened their homes to you when you were traveling because they knew you were unlikely to be able to stay in a hotel.
Now, once you get to the end of high school, how did you decide which college you were going to go to?
Well, I decided, I was kind of a homebody at that time, and I didn't want to go I wanted to go away to school because my father always said, my father and mother said that part of the experience of going to college is going away, living on your own semi, because you still have the support of your family, but getting to know different people from different cities and maybe cultures and so forth. So they felt that that was part of the education experience and encouraged all of us to go away to school. So I had visited my siblings who were older than me in their very respective colleges. My sister Carrie went to Baldwin Wallace College in Berea, Ohio, which was a predominantly like white school, but she was the first homecoming queen, and the Black homecoming queen at that school. And I visited her on Little Sisters Weekend, and also
It must have been a big event.
yeah, it was a big event. It was my first plane ride when we went to Baldwin Wallace for Little Sisters Weekend. And then, you know, it was a big deal that she was homecoming queen. And so I saw that experience. Then I went to Johnson C. Smith, where my other sister Jamar and brother Joe went, and, you know, had a fabulous time there. And so I decided that I wanted to go to a small liberal arts college that was not too far away from home. And I decided I wanted to go to HBCU. And so that's how I chose Fisk. One of my counselors and at my high school took me and a group of about 4 or 5 other young ladies down to see Fisk. And although I had known people who had gone there, many of my church members and high school teachers through the years had gone to Fisk, but I had never been to Fisk. So he brought us down there, and by the time I left that weekend, I was sold. So that's how I ended up at Fisk.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I want to mention too about my childhood. there were demonstrations going on in Louisville regarding integration of the stores downtown, and my sister Carrie participated in those civil rights demonstrations. And I remember we always had to.
You would have been about 10 to 12 years old.
Yeah, I was in elementary school at the time, and I remember, we always had a night to wash dishes, and I was complaining about having to wash dishes on Carrie's night. And my father said, Billye, this is your contribution to the civil rights movement. You're washing dishes while your sister is down there demonstrating.
You were helping.
I was helping.
All right. When you got to college, tell me some of your favorite teachers, some of the courses that you took. What was it about college that influenced you?
Well, I was trying to, decide on a major and so forth. I guess I had already spent a lot of time being a journalist through my time at school, and then
You were on the school newspaper?
I was on the school newspaper.
You
And
didn't tell me that.
so journalism was something that I was interested in, but I was also interested in law. So I decided to major in English. My mother had majored in English, but English is a field where you actually learn history through literature, and you also have to analyze what you read and write about it, and you write a lot. So I think it was a good major for law school. And also, I did a double major, also in political science. I double majored in English and political science. So I took a con law course in undergraduate school, which was taught in the Socratic method. So that's the way they teach in law school. So that was very helpful. We had to brief cases. So when I got to law school, I already knew how to brief case. While I was in school, in college, I had summer jobs that were in the journalism field. I worked 1 year in the publicity department at the Kentucky State Fair and Exposition Center, where we wrote press releases for the events that were coming out for the fair. And then the following summer, I interned at the Louisville Times as a summer intern. And that when we had rotations in the various departments, I wrote several byline stories during that time. So that was really a very enriching experience.
I think you mentioned also the Fisk radio station.
Yes, during my time at Fisk, the radio station was created, and I was one of the first members of the radio station staff, and I did primarily news on the radio.
How did you learn?
Well, we did a internship for about a couple of weeks at WSM, and that was kind of fun. And we also
TV station,
the
right?
TV station, right? And we also got our radio licenses. So I got a third-class radio license from the FCC, and we had to take an exam to get that license.
Yes, you do. What was the Fisk Forum?
The Fisk Forum was the Fisk student newspaper, and I was I was the news editor for the Fisk Forum.
Who do you recall were some of your favorite professors?
Well, Rosa T. Purnell was the chairman of the English department, and she was one of my favorites. She was tough, but I ended up liking teachers that were tough. And sometimes I maybe didn't like it even in high school at first, but some of them became my favorite teachers. Jake Miller, Ed Jackson were both political science professors. Ben Pugh was over freshman orientation. And Arna Bontemps, the author, who was he was writer in residence at Fisk when I was there, well, I took a course from him, a writing course, but I also ended up with the honor of being his assistant.
And how did that happen?
Well, Miss Dr. Purnell asked me, she said, Professor Bontemps needs an assistant to help him with his correspondence and so forth. And she said, would you like to do that? I said, of course. And so that was really an honor. And, I helped him. I responded to his correspondence. And
He
so
was a
forth.
Harlem Renaissance.
He was a Harlem Renaissance author. Yes, yes. So that was really great. And then Dr. Collins was an English professor who was a legend at Fisk. Lucius Outlaw, who was not only my professor, but ultimately became my friend because he was a good friend of my husband. Marcellus Brooks, my Spanish professor, also later became a dear friend. And then Mabel Love was my dance teacher, and I liked her.
What type of dance were you involved?
I was involved in modern dance at Fisk. She was the dance teacher.
Now, what kind of social activities did you have while you were at Fisk? I think you told me you became a member of Phi Beta Kappa.
Right, now that wasn't social, and we didn't get inducted into that until till the end of, you're about to graduate. You got inducted into that.
Gold Key Honor Society.
Right, Gold Key Honor
And
Society.
who's who. But in order to do that, you had to study hard.
Right, yeah.
And they had speakers that would come to Fisk that were of some considerable influence in.
Yes, we had a lot of speakers that would come to Fisk. It was very a very rich environment with respect to that. And I participated in the Modern Black Mass Choir, which took a Southern tour one year where we went to Atlanta and went to a lot of places to sing. And that was an interesting experience, being involved with the Black Mass Choir.
But you also traveled overseas, didn't you?
Not during college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
jumped the gun. Sorry about that.
not, but I was also, I was a member, and still am a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and participated in the Model UN where we went to DC and represented various countries, and were doing a mock UN session.
Do you recall any special friends that you had?
Oh, yes, I had many friends, and there were 3 friends that came with me from Louisville to Fisk. One was Rosagale Walker Sanders and Lenore Ballard Patterson now, and Janice Smith. Now, well, she's deceased, Janice Smith Porter. When we came to Fisk, they called us the Louisville Express. And we were very good friends. And then I just, met a lot of people and gained a lot of friends, while I was there. I mean, I joined a sorority. Of course, I had a lot of wonderful sorority sisters, but also I had another friend, Ronald Campbell, who came from Louisville. He was a year ahead of us, and he would always tell us what we needed to do, and kind of mentored us coming into school. But Mary Ann Thomas Franklin is now, a very good friend. Chris Lipscomb, Daphne Smith, it was a wealth of friendships. And I have been very active with the Alumni Association, the class agent for my class, ever since I graduated, for 48 years now. And so as a part of that experience, I have become friends with some people that I wasn't necessarily friends with at the time, right, because of my interactions, right. And then, of course, a lot of people in the activities that I participated in, Black Mass Choir, I developed friendships. So it's a wealth of friendships developed from that relationship. Can't mention all the names.
I guess not necessary, but during the summers, after you would have a full year of studying activities, what did you do during your summers?
During college?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's what I mentioned, those jobs at the Kentucky State Fair.
What about the
and
amusement business?
Now, the Amusement Business magazine came after I graduated for that
was
summer
between-
between graduation and law school. And that was Amusement Business Magazine, which was a subsidiary of Billboard Publications. That's here in Nashville. And they covered like state fairs and carnivals, and they were getting ready to do a big thing on the bicentennial. And I was about to be promoted to the bicentennial editor, and then I informed them I was going to law school.
I think when you were telling me about that experience, you mentioned you were the first Black individual to be hired by them.
Yes, I was.
And there were some interesting questions that were
Yes,
asked.
I have often had interesting questions because I have been the first Black person or Black woman at just every job I've had, really. And yeah, they said, well, you know, the people in this industry are kind of clannish, and you know, do you think you'll be able to get along with them? I said, I can get along with anybody, you know, so.
I think you said if I wasn't, no.
Yeah, if I wasn't comfortable being with people that were unlike me, I wouldn't do anything.
Okay, so you were about to be promoted and you decided to go to law school.
Well, yeah,
How did that happen?
well, I was planning on going to law school. You know, I had decided when I was in college, I was going to law school. So I had applied to several schools, and I had been accepted at the University of Michigan and had a full scholarship, and been accepted at the University of Cincinnati. And I met my husband while I was matriculating at Fisk, and he, as his subtle hint for me to stay in Nashville, gave me an application to Vanderbilt Law School for Valentine's Day. So I applied, and fortunately I got in. And so that's kind of how I ended up at Vanderbilt.
That big hint.
Yeah,
And what year did you start?
I started in 1970, right after undergraduate school.
How much was the tuition?
Oh, gosh, Carol, the tuition was probably about, I saw some documents a few years back. I was cleaning out stuff. I think it was maybe about $1,300 a semester.
When did you finish law school?
I finished law school in 1977.
And you recall any of your favorite professors in law school, and what courses did you like?
Yes, well, I liked contracts. I liked con law.
Who was your professor?
Well, in contracts, it was Hartman, and he was tough. He was like a Professor Kingsfield in the paper chase. And I'm sure most Vanderbilt grads who matriculated during that time remember Professor Hartman. And I
Had a con law class.
yeah, I had a con law class, and you know, I enjoyed learning about constitutional law. We had a visiting professor, Charlie Quick, who taught evidence, and yeah, I enjoyed learning about evidence. I mean, that's the thing I enjoyed about law. It was learning the law. I was always a why child. I was asked why when I was growing up. And that's what led me toward journalism and law, is because you could get the answer by being a journalist, because you ask who, what, when, where, and why. And in the law, you research it. If you don't know the answer, they teach you how to research. I always tell young people today that the law degree is a research degree. So you can reinvent yourself because you hopefully have learned how to research.
And what about labor law?
Labor law, I did not take a course in labor law in law school. Yeah, I took UCC from Tom Sherrard, and I enjoyed that too. And I ended up working in a bank.
Now, I have to
But-
say, that's a very unusual comment that you enjoyed the UCC.
Well, it's really interesting about UCC because I like learning about the concepts, but then when we were getting ready to prepare for the exam, Professor Sherrard said we would need to know the code sections for the exam. And I said, well, I don't have time to learn all those code sections. I don't like memorizing stuff. So I ended up taking an audit for UCC. And at that time, I didn't know I was going to end up working at a bank, but I did understand the concepts.
If you didn't do labor law, did you have an opportunity to interact with Professor Bob Belton?
Oh, yeah, I take that back. I guess I did do. Well,
Employment law?
it was, I guess we called it employment. Yes, I did take employment law from Bob Belton. I enjoyed that class. He was, he had, you know,
I think he was the only.
he was the only African-American professor at that time. He had been one of the attorneys on the Big Riggs case, which was a big employment law case. Yeah, and he was,
Supreme Court case.
yeah, and he was, yeah, I really like Bob. I miss him today. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Charlie Quick was also a visiting professor. He was a Black professor who came during our time, so it was refreshing.
Tell me about some of your colleagues, your friends that you made in law school.
Well, one was Herschel Warren, who had been at Fisk. He was in my class at Fisk, but I didn't know him at Fisk. But I got to know him at Vanderbilt. And Marion Dockery is now really one of my very best friends to this day.
And you mentioned Daphne Smith.
And Daphne Smith. We were at Fisk together, but I really got to know her even better when we were in law school. Ruth Johnson, who was ahead of me, Denise Lamotte, and
you mentioned Herman.
And Herman Morris and Richard Dinkins. Richard Dinkins and I were in the same study group. Many of the people that I mentioned were all in the same study group.
And that is something that I think may or may not still be important in law school, and that's study groups. How many did you have in your study group, and how did you get together, and what did you do?
Well, there were about 6 of us, and as you know, in law school, you only get one exam, and you have to be prepared when you're called on, and you don't know when that is, and so that means you have to keep up. And so if you don't understand concepts as they come along, you'll fall behind because it's like a building block. So you've got to make sure you understand the concept. So if you're not getting a test on it, you've got to test yourself and make sure that you understand it. So your study group helps you to keep up. You know, you write outlines, you keep up. If there's something you don't understand, then you discuss it with your study group, and you know, somebody in your study group helps you to understand it. So it's a really important concept. You know, you do sample exams and stuff so that you're ready, and so that you're developing those building blocks all the way.
And it helps you also establish collegiality among your peer group.
Oh yes, most definitely.
You mentioned some activities that you engaged in. One of them was tennis.
Yes, well, I played tennis off and on most of my life. My godmother gave me a tennis racket when I was 6 years old, and she said, "This is a sport you can play all your life." Was she right? And she was right. And now I'm really into it. And so I would play tennis. As a matter of fact, Marcellus Brooks, one of my former professors at Fisk, who became a friend, was a tennis coach and, you know, an avid tennis player. And I played with him when I was studying for the bar. And I will say that on the days that I played tennis, I would get in that library and I would stay awake. And on the days that I didn't play, I would fall asleep trying to study for the bar.
And that's one of the side effects of playing tennis. When we're talking about activities, work, and friends, besides the tennis, what activities did you participate in at the law school? There was salsa?
Yes, I played.
That was a relatively new station.
Well, I don't know. It probably was, because there was never a critical mass of black students. There were only, I think, about,
I think you were a year before.
yeah, about 12 black students in my class, if that many. And, you know, there were about 9 in the classes above us. So there was, you know, earlier, I'm sure there was not a critical mass.
Right. I'm thinking it started about the time that you enrolled.
Maybe so. I don't recall that history, but
what did you do in the moot court?
oh, I argue cases. And I thought that was one of the, I enjoyed that because, as you know, law school is very theoretical. I mean, you're learning law theory, you're really not learning how to practice law. And so moot court was an opportunity to actually argue a case. And so I enjoyed that, as well as the legal clinic, where I actually represented some clients in juvenile court.
How did you get on the student faculty relations board?
I think I just signed up for it. I don't know whether I was selected or not, but I mean, whether, someone had to select me, I don't remember the process, but
What did it do?
well, we tried to talk to the faculty about things like enrollment, accepting more diverse students. I recall them saying, "Oh, well, we accepted, maybe 30 Black students, but only 10 came." Well, they were accepting the same students that were applying to the Ivy League schools, and the Vanderbilt wasn't their church or first choice. There were issues regarding when I got there was only one small restroom for ladies. We had to stand in line between classes, so they had to convert one of the men's rooms into a ladies' room so that we would be able to take care of business between classes more quickly.
While you were in law school, did you have any opportunity to do a clerkship?
Yes, I did, and that was a very valuable experience. I just happened to see a note on a bulletin board that Woods and Woods was looking for a law clerk, and I applied. And
What year was this?
this would have been my second year in law school.
Okay.
And because it's hard for a first-year law student to get a position. And that would have been my second year in law school.
And what was the nature of the work that you did?
Oh, I did everything. I mean, it was, well, I shouldn't say everything, but it was a general practice law firm. And I wrote briefs. I updated the law library and put the books into the pocket parts in the law library. Helped.
Went to the courthouse.
Yeah, oh yes, I did filings at the courthouse.
There were people down there
I got
too.
to know people down there. In fact, that was an invaluable
Who
experience.
was at the law firm at the time? What lawyers do you know?
Frank Woods, Larry Woods, Jinx Thomas, and Jim Bryan. And Bob Watson, I think, came later. Yeah, Bob Watson came later because we were clerking at the same time at one point. And it was a very congenial law firm, but very busy. Everything had to be done yesterday. And I credit Larry Woods for teaching me how to use a dictaphone. Because I was sitting in the conference room, writing a brief by hand, and Larry pulled the sheet up. He said, "Miss Sanders, you don't have time to write that longhand. Pick up that dictaphone and dictate that brief." So I'm thinking, okay. Pick up the dictaphone, and I've got all my books laid out, and I just start talking, instead of writing. And that was one of the most valuable skills I ever learned as a lawyer, because after that, every place I went, I introduced a dictaphone.
Now, do people use dictaphones?
Well, I don't know if they do or not, but I dictated drafts of whatever I was doing and had my assistant type it up, and then I would correct it, on the computer or by hand before we had computers.
Before you had computers, I was going to say, at the time that you started, I doubt that you had a computer. You had the typewriters, and they had to produce your memo and let you edit it. And
That's
then
correct.
they had to either write it, or if they had a electric typewriter, maybe some of it was on a tape or something.
Yeah.
What did you do during your summers? You had this job in your second year. What did you do? Did you continue work there, or did you do anything else?
I continued to work at Woods and Woods the whole time I was in law school. I actually worked during the school year also, 20 hours a week. And so it was invaluable because, again, the law school is theoretical, and it gave me actual practical skills. I remember Dennis Hale, who was an assistant there, told me, you need to, make friends with people in the clerk's office. Because, I'd be running down there, getting there at 4:25 in traffic, there's no online filing then, you had to take the documents there, they had to stamp them in. And I'd be running down there in rush hour traffic, it just came off the typewriter, and filing things. And so I made friends with people in the clerk's office, and, I just always advised you, and they would let me in when they had closed the door.
Now, at what point in your law school did you get married?
I got married in December of my first year of law school, which was kind of crazy, but I did it over Christmas break.
Now, let's talk a little bit at this point about your family. Tell us about your spouse and how you met him. We know how you met him, but those first few years when you started, what was he doing while you were in law school?
Well, my husband was the assistant academic dean at Fisk University when I was in law school, and we met while I was at Fisk, and that's a longer story than I probably have to tell you. I'm done to tell you, but but we got engaged about 3 days before I graduated, and then we got married that following December, which was in my first year of law school.
I have a note here that he attended the Aspen Institute.
Yes, that first year, like I said, it was hard to get a job when you were a first year student. And so he had been a Watson Fellow when he was at Wesleyan University. That's where he went to undergraduate school. Thomas J. Watson Fellow, and the Aspen Institute
Thomas J. Watson Fellow at IBM.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Okay.
And Edwin was invited to attend the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, which is a think tank where all these renowned people come to think about issues of the nation and the world. And we didn't really know much about it at the time, but they wanted some younger people and some younger voices involved. So they invited a former Watson Fellow to come. So I didn't get a job that summer, so I said, okay, let's go to we'll go to Aspen. And we were out there for about a month. And it was just an incredible experience. We met
Justice Blackman.
We met Aaron Copeland and Bill Moyers. We went fishing with Bill and Jewish Warriors, and we ate fish that we caught, and we met John Lindsay, who was a former mayor of New York, and Griffin Bell, who was the attorney general at the time. And it was just an incredible experience. And
how did you get there?
We drove. My husband had a little orange Porsche, and we drove cross country in that Porsche in our bathing suits, and we got to Aspen, and it was a wonderful experience. He was involved in the conversations. They were talking about an American Testament, so to speak, and they were studying the Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the Constitution, and talking about what this meant for our future. And so he was in the circle with the group talking, but I was sitting in the gallery, so to speak, just listening to all this. And then we had social activities with all these people, and it was a tremendous experience.
It sounds like.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far away from your family at this point. Tell me about your children.
Okay, I have 3 children. My stepson, Edwin Samunier, and Grace Sanders Johnson, and Joseph Sanders are my children.
And what do they do at this point?
Well, they
They're
are all
adults.
adult children. And Edwin is a minister in Chicago. Grace is a tenured professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And Joseph is a entrepreneur. He has a marketing company in Portland, Oregon.
Do you have any grandchildren?
I have,
We just want to be sure we mention that.
yes, I have 3 grandchildren. My daughter, Grace, and her husband have 2. And my son and his wife have
You
1.
want to name them or not?
I'm not going to name them, but
That's all right.
they're precious.
And do you think any of those little ones, I'm not sure how they'll, are potential lawyers?
Who knows? Who knows? It's a little early.
Would you be recommending law school to any of them?
Well, I kind of I found that sometimes you have to use reverse psychology with children. You know, if you push them in a direction, then they go the opposite. So I'll let them find their way. And if they're interested, I'm always happy to
Do you
explore
have
the
any other
benefits.
lawyers in the-
Yes, as a matter of fact, my sister-in-law is a lawyer, Rita Sanders Geyer, who's the plaintiff in the famous Geyer versus University of Tennessee lawsuit. And
She's your husband's.
she's my husband's sister, right. And
And that
then,
is famous.
yeah, she is famous. And then she has a daughter named after her now at UT. And my niece, my sister's daughter, Margaret Jones Thomas, is an attorney. She's a graduate of West Point, and she went to the University of Virginia to law school, and she worked in the JAG Corps for a while. Now she's retired from the military, but she works at the Pentagon.
That's very impressive. Now let's go back to, we went off to the Aspen Institute in the first summer. We come back and we're working at Woods and Woods, but we all know that as you get towards the end of law school, you begin to think about where you're going to go and what did you do?
Well, I applied, to the AG, and I started looking around. And well, I guess during my senior year, Frank Woods bought an interest in United American Bank. And he was, our firm, Woods was doing the legal work for them. So I was doing title searches and opinion of counsel letters and a lot of work for the bank. And Frank said, I called down to the firm because we were a small firm and everybody's in court. I want somebody dedicated to me. And he asked me if I would be the in-house counsel at United American Bank. Well, I was just, bored and very, very happy about that. And so I became the in-house counsel, and there was no legal department there, so I was the legal department, and it was a great opportunity.
What were some of the tasks or job assignments that you had during that time?
Well, that was during the time when the truth in lending laws were coming out. And everything was changing in the banking industry because, it was the first time you had those forms with those little boxes that said what the interest rate was and all that sort of thing. So part of my role was to update the officers about the truth in lending laws or whatever new regulations there were. So I had my own little law library in my office that I had ordered that, had periodicals that would come in to update me on this information. And I did seminars. I call myself practicing preventive law in many ways because I did seminars on employment law, sexual harassment, in the records and operations. I did contracts. I was also the liaison between the bank and our outside counsel. So if there was something that I didn't handle, then I would be the one who refer that out to the firms, and I would keep up with what the legal work was that was out at the law firm. So it was a very responsible job. I would say, I was a young person. There were many older people, older than I was, I was advising. And, there were challenges, there were people who would ask me questions that they already knew the answer to because they were testing me. And how did I know this? Because they told me after I gave them the answer. They said, oh, that's what so-and-so said. So, it was challenging. I remember Finest Nelson, who was the honorary chair of the board. He was so gracious. He said to me, he had been in banking for years. And he said to me, Billye, at this point, he said, I don't know much more than you do because everything is changing. And it was really true. Everything was changing in the banking industry.
So how long were you at United American Bank?
I was there for about 6 years.
And during that time, were there any unusual things that happened or experiences that you recall?
Well, yes. I mean, I guess over time, I became the corporate secretary, and that meant I attended to the senior loan committee meetings and the board meetings. We had a lot of social events because everybody was involved in business development. We used to have a branch right there on West End where J. Alexander's / Redlands is now. That was United American Bank, and we'd have parties before the Vanderbilt football games and entertain our clients. I made my first appearance in court there because we would normally send bankruptcies out to our outside counsel. And then one day I said, this is probably going to be a no assets case. I'm going to just try this myself. And it was a situation where someone had really lied on their financial statement. When they got a renewal of the loan, they were really probably bankrupt at that point. And so I decided to hear that case, and I won it. And I was very proud that they did not, that person did not get discharged in bankruptcy. Frank Woods was a mentor to me. I used to write he did a lot of speeches to banks and so forth on corporate responsibility and liability, directors' liability, and I used to write his speeches. But I always appreciate the opportunities that he and Larry gave me.
And while you were there, I think you mentioned you had your first child.
I did have my child.
How did you manage that before they had all these maternity leave programs?
Well, at that time, most women got 6 weeks maternity leave. That was just kind of the standard in general.
Wasn't written down.
It wasn't written down anywhere. And so I just said, this is the way I've been all my life. If you don't ask, you're never going to get anything. And the worst thing they can say is no. Okay. So I asked for 3 months maternity leave and I got it. And so that was very helpful.
You can help that Jane Ann Woods worked there too.
Yeah. Jane Ann was not at the bank.
Oh, that's right.
She was the commissioner of revenue actually when I went to Woods. And because she had just left to be commissioner of revenue. And then she was actually they started another firm, Bone & Woods. Yes. So she was with Bone & Woods. She didn't go back to Woods.
That's where you met Charles Bone.
Yeah, that's where I met Charles Bone. So
Grace was born in 82.
Yeah, she was born in 82, and I took maternity leave. And I remember Frank sent me flowers about a week or two before I was coming back and said, "You are coming back." So I came back, and but about 3 months after I came back, the bank went into receivership and was purchased. The assets were purchased by Union Planters Bank in Memphis, and my job was eliminated. They had counsel in Memphis, and so they did not lead the legal department.
So the FDIC came in.
The FDIC
receivership happened.
Right, and
Union Planters.
Right.
What did you do?
Well, the FDIC hired me as a consultant to help them clean up some stuff. But then I took some time off and just stayed at home with my daughter for a while. Continue to do some civic work.
Well, while you were at home, how did it happen that you ended up getting back in the legal profession, and how long was it?
Well, it was about a year, and I got a call from Henry Walker at the Public Service Commission, who said he needed someone to come work there while one of his attorneys, Jean Moran, was on maternity leave. And he said, you can work 1 hour a week, you can work 40 hours a week. I just need somebody to help while she's gone. So after negotiating a salary that would pay me more than my daycare expenses and my parking, I agreed to go to the Public Service Commission. And I worked there, I think, about 3 days a week while Jean was on maternity leave. Then
What did you learn during that time?
more about public utilities than I ever thought I wanted to learn. And at that time, I was.
Explain that for those who are unfamiliar with Public Service Commission did, we know that by its acronym, but they've morphed several times.
Oh, more a lot, right. The Public Service Commission is an industry that is an agency, I should say, a government agency that regulates public utilities, investor-owned utilities. At that time, they regulated motor carriers, which meant they regulated trucks that carried goods intrastate from one portion to the state to another. And they also regulated telecommunications companies, gas companies, water companies that were investor-owned, not municipal. And we had hearings in which the companies would seek to get authority to operate. And they got certificates of convenience and necessity. They also had to file with the commission if they wanted to borrow money or do a financing or issue stock. So we had to represented the staff attorneys, represented the public interest in those cases.
And you had to scrutinize their filings and make sure that they were accurate. And then did you recommend or did you have approval authority?
We took a position in those cases. We were advocates for the public interest on wanting to make sure if they were in a rate case, that they're trying to increase their rates, that they were reasonable. And so we were actually a party in those cases.
Before an ALJ?
Before an ALJ or the commissioners. Some cases were heard by an administrative law judge. Some cases were heard directly by the commissioners. There were 3 commissioners that were elected statewide that ran that agency.
Now you're filling in for a lady that has had a child and she comes back, and what happens?
She said, well, that she didn't want to work full time anymore. And so she said, would you be willing to consider sharing this job with me? And
How many job sharing positions did you know of at the time?
none. As a matter of fact, it was unprecedented, certainly in state government, that this would happen. So Jean and I put together a proposal where we would share the job. She would work 2.5 days a week. I would work 2.5 days a week. We would share one salary. And we even said we would give up benefits, which was, maybe that was a negotiating point at some point. But anyway, and we both had husbands that had benefits, and we shared that job, and they agreed. That's the monumental part, that the state government agreed to do this. And
did they hire you with benefits?
well, no, even when I was working part-time, I did not have benefits. So she worked 2.5 days a week. I worked 2.5 days a week. On Wednesdays, we discussed our cases so that if anyone called, I'd know I'd be conversing on her cases and she'd be conversing on mine. So we wouldn't have to say, oh, you have to wait till she gets back. We were on it. So they really got 2 heads for the price of 1 less benefits.
And how long
So
did that last?
that lasted for about 3 years. Or I had another baby while we were doing that. And then when my son went to preschool full time, we both went to work for the commission full time with benefits. But it not only benefited us, but it benefited some of the other women and men in the commission, because the commission was more open to flex time, and they allowed people to come in early and leave late. They still did their 8 hours, but maybe they came in at 7 instead of at 8 or whatever. So I think the whole agency benefited from the relationship.
One thing that I overlooked is in the early experience about taking the bar exam. Was there anything difficult or memorable about preparing for the exam? I didn't ask you that.
Well, I mean, I took a bar review course, which I would recommend to anybody. And you know, it was a 2-day exam. It was very memorable. I did take time off from my job at the bank to study the last week, because I had even asked, you want me to wait until after the bar to start working? And Frank said, no, I want you to go on and work. So I said, but I do need some time to study. So I think I took a couple of weeks off or something before the bar. And then I told him after the bar, I said, I want to take a month off, because I said, after this, I'm never going to have any time off. I'm going to be working. And so I took a month off without pay, and my husband and I just took a driving trip to Canada.
What was your starting salary at the bank?
$15,000. And that was a lot. That was more than the AG was paying. And more than, you know, some of the other places I had applied were paying.
Was it as much as some of your male colleagues?
Probably not. I'm pretty sure not. Yeah, because I later learned, you know, it's really interesting working in a bank. You see people's financial statements in other industries, and I learned that a lot of people were making a lot more money than I was by looking at people's financial statements.
You did the bank, you come to the PSC, you had this transformational job sharing experience, and now you're full-time at the PSC. You're doing administrative hearings. What was your next challenge?
Well, I guess my next challenge was, you know, do I want to be here, you know, the rest of my life? You know, public utilities was never something that I had on my radar as wanted to know about. It was a niche area. People didn't know a lot about it. There was a fraternity of attorneys who practiced before their commission. They didn't report the cases, so many times I would call an attorney who was new to the commission up to my office and try to school them on what was going on at the commission. Because, you know, you can't research if cases aren't reported. And the ones that are regularly practicing there will pull cases out of their desk drawer and say, oh, this is the precedent. And there would have been no way for someone who didn't regularly practice before the agency to know that. So I was learning a lot that I didn't know at the time how useful that would be. And I guess Henry Walker left, and I felt I should be the heir apparent to that position.
Is that,
However,
what was his position?
he was the general counsel.
Okay.
By then, I was the deputy general counsel. And I got wind that the commissioners decided to do a national search. Well, I was insulted by that, but I didn't say anything to anybody. I began to look around, and then I was at an end of court meeting, and I saw General Leach, who had been General Bill Leach, who had the former attorney general. He was working at Waller. He was a partner at Waller then. And I was a member of the end of court organization. And I knew he knew the commissioners. So at that meeting, I said to him, I said, General Leach, I would like for you to put a good word in for me with the commissioners for the job of general counsel of the Public Service Commission. And he said, well, sure, Billye, I'd be happy to do that. And then he said, but I hope you don't get that job. And I said, well, why? And he said, because I'd like to see you come to Waller. And I was floored. I think I was speechless. I don't know what I said. We just kind of said, okay, we'll talk about it later. So I immediately, the next day, called Waverly Crenshaw, who was a friend of mine. He had formerly worked as Attorney General, but he was a partner at Waller at the time. And I said, General Lee said he wanted to see me come to Waller. I said, was he serious? And he said, yes, Billye, he was serious. We need to have lunch. So we talked about it. And
So
after that, I went through a series of interviews. And I might say at the same time that the Public Service Commission was reorganizing.
it was called
And it was becoming the
Tennessee Regulatory.
Tennessee Regulatory Authority. There were some statutory changes coming about, and they were going to take the general counsel's office out, the advocacy portion of the general counsel. There would still be a general counsel, but they would work with the commissioners. The advocacy portion was going to the consumer advocate. So they were creating an office of the consumer advocate. So there was legislation being proposed. And in the legislation, it said the senior member of the staff at the Public Service Commission would become the consumer advocate. You can't put a name in a statute, but that was me. So that was going on at the same time. I didn't know whether I was going to get the job at Waller. So I had applied to some banks. I had done a lot of things. So I actually got that job as a consumer advocate, and was introduced to the Attorney General's staff. Attorney General introduced me to the staff as the new Deputy Attorney General, who would be the consumer advocate. And the same day I was going for an interview at Waller. So I didn't know what was going to happen. And, but I ended up getting the job at Waller, and I, resigned from the consumer advocate.
And what was the focus of your assignment at Waller?
Well, I was actually going to be a member of the corporate group. And while I had done corporate work as in-house counsel to the bank, I had not done corporate transactional work, mergers and acquisitions and that sort of thing. So that was going to be new to me. And I had been in the regulatory world because banking is heavily regulated. The PSC is a regulatory agency. So that was new to me. So one of the first things I had to do was learn the Waller way of doing things. But as far as being an attorney, I actually had been practicing law longer than several of the attorneys at Waller. Waller's an older law firm, and I was expecting a lot of the attorneys to be older, but some of the partners were younger. So I will say one of the most difficult things that I had initially was subordinating myself, because I was running the legal department at the Public Service Commission. Because even when I was a deputy general counsel, I did a lot of the management stuff. I did the budgets. I did a whole lot of management things. Well,
Henry
didn't like to do that stuff. So I ran I started and ran the legal department of the bank. So, I was used to being in charge. So that was the most difficult thing, subordinating myself.
And during that time, did Patsy Cottrell call you, another lawyer, the AG's office?
Yeah, she did.
What did she tell you?
Well, I think she had, before I actually accepted the job, when I was, because I told some of the seniors, that I would be leaving, she, tried to convince me to come back to the AG.
Well, now that you are in the law firm of Waller, and you are working with individuals who don't have as much experience as you and are younger than you, how did that work out?
Oh, it worked out fine. The firm was very supportive of me. They wanted me to succeed. They had a reception for me when I came, which I don't think they had done it for everybody. So I could have, potential clients come in and other, colleagues. They started doing like welcoming receptions for every new attorney that came in. And so the firm wanted me to succeed, but I did have to learn those things. I did not know, corporate transactional work. So that was, important to me to learn the Waller way. But while I was working with various partners on various cases and various deals, I was also taking from each one of them the things that I would do once I had the ability to be the leader on a case. So that was very helpful. But in the meantime, I was developing clients in the utility area, because I was in the lobby of the Nashville City Center the week before I started working, And there was a man who was representing a major telecommunication company. I'm not going to say the names of my clients because that's not appropriate. But if I said the name of this company, you would know it. And he said, "Didn't you work the Public Service Commission?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to start at Waller next week." He said, "Well, we're looking for somebody to do regulatory monitoring for our company." And he said, "Give me your card." I said, "I don't even have a business card yet." And so my first client, I had a client when I walked in the first day, and I was just an associate. I was not hired as a partner. I was hired as an associate. So I had two different rates. I had a regulatory rate, which was more in line with a partner rate, which was for clients that were at the Public Service Commission. And then I had a corporate rate, which was for the new stuff I was learning, which was more on the lines with an associate rate.
And while you were learning the Waller way, who acted as your mentor?
Well, I had various mentors. Well, Reggie Hill was the head of the corporate group, and Beth Guess and Ralph Davis. I was working on cases with them.
Was it Phil Davidson?
No, Phil Davidson was the managing partner at the time. Okay. And so, I was working on cases with them then. So they were, guiding me through that process. But Waverly Crenshaw and Bill Leach were really my mentors at that time, even though they were in different practice groups. They were helping me to navigate what was going on. Bill Leach died, actually before I became a partner, but Waverly was really my primary mentor at Waller. He's now a federal judge.
So how did your practice develop? You have your own client or maybe more coming in because of your regulatory experience. And then you have your corporate area that's developing for you. What else was going on?
Well, again, I was, learning the firm and learning, I think, and I say this to anyone who goes into a large law firm, you need to learn the finances of the firm, how that works, what's important, and so forth. So I was learning that as well, and Waverly helped me a lot with that. But I think it's important to just when you're an associate to just do good work. You kind of have to do good work, but you also have to meet the people in the firm and people in other practice groups. So I attended all the social activities and so forth, because when it's time to get voted for partner, it's not just people you work with that are voting, it's everybody in the firm. So you have to get to know the people in the firm.
Did you expand your own personal client base while you were there?
Oh, yes, I did. We went to a lot of corporate bar association and corporate counsel meetings to meet national clients and so forth. But, getting clients is a lot about referrals. And some of my former colleagues at the commission went to work for utilities and they hired me to do work. And then other attorneys who practice before the commission, if they have conflicts, there's only a handful of people who are really concentrated in this area. If they had a conflict, they would refer me work. So that's something that I was concerned about, because I didn't think that I knew people that could be clients of a firm like Waller that has these higher prices and so forth. But I fortunately I was able to do it, and because I had a unique skill set. So I learned a lot about utilities at the time, not knowing how it would help me later in my career.
Was there a time when should have been made partner?
Well, probably, but it's okay. I made partner, and I did make partner. Well, there's a process, and I was in the corporate group at the time, so there's certain things that you have to do, and you have to develop certain skill sets. And I ended up working with one partner for a long time on doing banking mergers and acquisitions, and I would produce these books that look like a telephone book for these documents for these mergers and acquisitions, and I was good at it. So I kept getting that assignment when I should have probably been doing other things, but it all worked out. And so, I became a partner, and
How long was it from the time that you started until you actually became a partner?
oh, I think maybe it was, I can't tell you exactly, maybe about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but usually if you're a baby lawyer, it takes about 7. You have to come straight out of law school. But I did have experience, as a lawyer that I brought to the table.
Did you have any participation in the local bar at the time, other than just working at Waller?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always been active with the Napier-Louis Bar Association and the largest association for women and the National Bar Association. I actually served as assistant treasurer of the National Bar, and I was asked to run for a board position, but I just felt like I had too much going on to run for that. I think that was when I was at the Public Service Commission. I just had too much going on to run for the bar. But I've always been active with the various bar associations. I belong to the American Bar Association. And
Now, when you became a partner, you were an equity partner?
yes,
And what is that as opposed to a non-equity partner?
an equity partner means that you have some ownership in the firm. And, there are different levels of ownership, but you do have some ownership. And a non-equity partner means you don't actually have an ownership stake, but you are performing at the level of a partner. So the outside world usually doesn't know whether you're equity or non-equity. That's really an internal thing.
And that was something that they created after you became an equity partner. It didn't happen in time.
Yeah, I think they didn't have non-equity partners at that time. They later created that.
You were there for a while. Were there any changes in your employment after you went to work for Waller?
Yes, as a matter of fact, because my business development niche was telecommunications, I ended up moving from the corporate group to the regulatory group. And I ended up doing land use for a very large corporation. If I mentioned that company's name, everyone would know. And actually, that company ended up being one of the top 10 clients of the firm, and I was the relationship partner for that company.
That's very good.
Yeah, it is very good.
So did you stay with Waller for a number of years?
Yes, I was with Waller for 15 years. Yeah, I was with Waller for 15 years, and it was, I learned a lot. I had very collegial colleagues. It's very inspirational to me to work with a bunch of type A people. Everybody's really moving and shaking and intelligent, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the clients. The only thing I didn't like was more hours. Because you always felt like, I feel like I hadn't done enough. I mean, one day I was representing this client who was one of the first telecommunication companies to get authority to compete with Bell South. Historic case, okay? There were 6 companies getting authority that day. I was representing one of them. And, we got our authority. I took my client to lunch. We were all excited. Got back to my office. It was only about, 1:30 or 2 o'clock when I got back to the office. And, that's the day that you feel like, oh, I've done a day's work. I can go home. But it's like, on to the next thing, because you got to keep building out. Yeah.
Keeps you there. So you're working along. What year did you go with Waller? I forgot.
It was well, let me tell you, do some math.
Yeah.
Guess it was 1994, probably.
And at about 1998, 8 or so, you became a partner.
Something
About
like
4
that,
years,
yeah.
3 years out. And you're now working more in the regulatory business rather than in the corporate
Mhm.
acquisitions, mergers area. You had a health condition come up,
Yes,
and how did that affect you?
well, I guess I, had breast cancer, but it was fortunately, something that was like stage 0, so I was able to, arrest it. And, but that made me think about my mortality. Um, I am very fortunate, very blessed, to, be cancer free, to the best of my knowledge. And, but then I started thinking about, okay, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And I decided that, I might need to just, do something else and have more, so I can have more flexibility. So I just started thinking about an exit strategy. Also, my children had graduated from high school. They were in college. And I started thinking about the fact that, in fact, I think they might have graduated from college by then. Yeah, they were starting to graduate from college. And I thought, I was up at my office one night, beautiful office, looking out at the, at the horizon of the view. And my husband works a lot out of town, and he was out of town, and I thought, am I working, this hard, And so I just decided I needed to make a transition. Now I will say this: we always took vacations with our children. We always traveled. We even traveled internationally while I was working, because I feel like life is too short not to enjoy the journey. So I don't have any regrets about that. I balanced a lot, but I don't have any regrets. But I just decided, because I've had that illness, I don't really know whether this will come back or how long I have. So I have some other things that I want to do.
So I think you told me that was about 2005.
Yeah, probably about, yeah, 2005. Yeah.
And then did you decide at some point to leave Waller?
Yeah, I didn't leave until 2009.
What did you?
And I decided to just think a little while about what I wanted to do. And it's so interesting because I was really, the only person at Waller that really did public utilities regulations. There were some people there that, helped me with some things, but that was not really an area that the firm practiced in. So some of my clients, my utility clients, called me after I left. And so I was still doing work before the commission after I left as a sole practitioner. And that was kind of fun. And I had been an arbitrator for the AAA while I was at Waller. Early on, I became an arbitrator, but most of those cases I had to decline because I had a conflict of interest, because Waller's client base was so large that I often had a conflict. Or, my arbitrator rate was lower than my billable rate as an attorney at Waller, so I wasn't gonna not do the work that I had, for the firm to do something at a lower rate. So, and I did some of those cases just as sort of like CLE, just to learn how to be on the other side, because I will say that being a quote unquote private judge or a judge helps you to see the mistakes that attorneys make, and gives you some perspective about what judges are looking for. So it was very valuable in that regard. So, but then when I left Waller, I didn't have conflicts anymore. So I was able to, take on more arbitration cases. So I'm still doing that, as well as, and I was doing the regulatory work for a good while after I left Waller, and that has kind of slowed down, and I'm actually doing probate work now.
That's a nice transition. But as we talk about your evolving career, you've mentioned a number of people like Billye and Waverly who have had a strong influence on your career. Are there any other people that you recall that you would credit with being influential? you said Barry Woods and Frank Woods, opportunities that came along.
Right, right.
Are there any ones that we haven't touched on at this point?
Well, I would say, I have friends, Marion Dockery, Denise Lamote, who, we commiserated. Ruth Johnson, we always commiserated regarding our careers and what we were doing. Marion and I have done some joint things. She was living in Atlanta at the time. She's in DC now, but I've worked with her on some cases and so forth after I left Waller. It's so hard for me to name names because there were just a lot of people along the way. Reggie Hill, George Bishop. I remember George Bishop was the first person to send me out by myself on a case, on a corporate transactional case, when I was an associate and it was out of town. I think it was in North Carolina, and I went to close this deal by myself. And he said to me, he said, well, Billye, you can practice law for X number of years, blah, blah, blah. You can do this. And that was my best day as a lawyer up to that time at Waller, because he trusted me to go close that case. And I did. And I remember the client sent me a really nice thank you note for the job that I did on that. And I remember I sent George.
Well, an easier question to address is, from the time that you started, maybe at the PSC, up until you left Waller, what were the changes that you saw in the practice of law and how people practice law?
Oh, most definitely technology. When I started out, we had to do research in books. And if you didn't have a law library in your place of employment, you had to either go to Vanderbilt, and fortunately I was a lawman and could get into that law library, or the Supreme Court library. And even when I started at the bank, I had to order books, that dealt with banking. I had the code sections in my office that dealt with banking. I didn't have the whole US code, but I had those, and I had all these periodicals. And now, research is done electronically. You can stay in your office and do research. So that's major. Even the word processing, we had electric typewriters at Woods and Woods. And then at the bank, I remember we had one person who did word processing. So if you had a big document, you could send it to the word processing center. But no computers for individuals. When I went to the Public Service Commission, I remember the executive director saying, no, there's this thing called the internet. But we've got to learn about it, And so
that person was right.
And so, the internet was starting to be a thing, and we didn't get computers, but I believe our assistants got computers at that time. When I went to Waller, most people didn't have computers, but every new attorney got a computer. So I got a computer in my office when I went to Waller. But some of the other ones who were younger than me still didn't even want a computer in their office. They refused to have a computer. And we started getting email. Initially, email was internal. And I said, oh, this is great. This internal email. Then I said, this is going to be really worrisome. When we start getting external emails, then we started getting them from clients. Then came all the advertising. So, even that was incremental. We used to have faxes.
Let me change the focus for a minute. We start talking about growing up in Louisville and Jim Crow experiences. What would you say was the transition from the time you started law school until you left Waller, as far as race relations in your opinion, in the community in Nashville, and if you feel like you didn't make a statement, maybe national?
Well, I think things are better, but we still have a long way to go. And then there's a retrenchment movement going on. So, as I said, I was the first Black person to be a law clerk at Woods and Woods. I was the first Black person, first woman to be an in-house counsel at a bank. I was the first Black person to be an attorney at the Public Service Commission. And I was the first Black female partner at Waller and first Black female partner in a large Nashville firm. Now, I don't say that as a badge of honor. I say that as an example of how much lack of opportunity there was. When I came out of law school, there were a a critical mass of female attorneys coming out. So things were starting to change. I mean, LAW was formed, Cable, which is a professional a professional networking organization was formed because there were private clubs women couldn't go to. You know, so I have lots of friends, you included, who are first in a lot of things that they have done. So, you know, we have done a lot of trailblazing during the last 45 years, 46 years, or longer, last 50 years. There's been a lot of trailblazing, a lot of first-time women judges, a lot of first-time Black judges. But we have a long way to go. I mean, I remember when we were celebrating the right to the women's right to vote in Tennessee a few years. I was, you know, doing a thing at Belmont, and at that time we didn't have a Black female Supreme Court justice. We just got a Black female Supreme Court justice last year. So we do have a long way to go.
Now, I'm going to switch to what happens in politics. You have indicated that your parents were involved in politics. You registered to vote when you were 18. You paid attention to what was happening in the communities that you were living in, and your comments just now indicate a reflection of progress made, but not enough. So in your own family, as you became an attorney, you couldn't really be active when you were working for the PSC. That probably wouldn't have gone over well. But when you were at Waller, were you actively political?
Well, I would say in some ways, yes. We were very conscious of laws at Waller. And we worked together, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans worked together for our clients' interests. And, you know, we had a little group, you know, in our regulatory group that decided what candidates our PACs were going to support. And when we were trying to get legislation passed, we worked, you know, both of them. We had some Republican partners and we had some Democrat, and we worked together to get it done. And so, and that's the thing that I realized that that I guess I realized really when I was at the bank how important politics is and legislation is. That, you know, I always tell people now, I said, when the legislature is in session, your life is in peril, because at the time that the bank was about to go into receivership, we were trying to get, George Thompson was our lobbyist at that time. We were trying to get a state interstate banking law passed. If we had gotten that law passed, there was a company that was going to buy the bank, but it didn't pass. So, you know, legislation affects everything. And one of the big cases that I had at the commission where General Leach came up there, he was trying to get some authority for our company. And I told him, you know, we couldn't do it. And I said, you need to be up with the legislature. I can't waive a statute. You know, the commission can't waive a statute. But, you know, that
Legislature can change.
but the legislature can change this. So I think it's something that people don't realize. And, you know, I came to realize over time that there might be some little provision in a law, and most people don't understand it, but it was written for one company who lobbied for that one little provision in the law. And most people aren't paying attention. And legislation and being involved in monitoring what's going on the state, local, and federal level is extremely important.
And it's still going on.
And it's still going on. And some people are asleep while it's going on.
Well, after you decided to take time off and it left Waller, what political involvement did you have on behalf of your husband?
Well, my husband ran for governor while I was at Waller.
I didn't realize
Yeah,
that. Was that
yeah, that was in 2001, I believe. yeah, that he ran for governor.
And
Yeah.
what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I learned that it's really hard and it takes a lot of work. It's very hard. And my friend, Barbara Bill always says you have to have mom.
You have to have what?
Mom, MOM, money and organization and a message. And we had a message. We had a small organization, but we didn't have a lot of money.
And what did you do with regards to community activities now? Talked a little bit about politics. I'm not looking for that, but I think you mentioned at one time you had been in Leadership Nashville.
Right. I'm a member of Leadership Nashville, and I actually belonged to that while I went through that while I was at the Public Service Commission.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, right.
And then you became a member of their alumni association.
Yeah, yes, I'm currently a member of the Alumni Association. I formerly served on that board.
You mentioned cable. Tell
Right.
me about your involvement there. Were you present?
Yeah, I was president. I was third president of cable, and that was again, that was an old girls' network to establish something where relationships with. There was an old boys network, and Mary Schaffner, who was one of my classmates, was considered the founding mother. You were involved. You were a founding member, and there was a critical mass of women who were in
Networking.
who needed a network, needed to know each other. And we established that. Jane Ann Woods was the first speaker at our first luncheon, and she was Commissioner of Revenue at the time. And
You had a number of notable speakers at lunches, and there would be one speaker who would come, and I think you said Al Gore.
right, Al Gore was a speaker when
And
we
he was a
gave
classmate of yours?
Al Gore was a classmate of mine at Vanderbilt. We took a class in communications law together, which was a small seminar class. There were only like maybe 15 people in that class. So that was really interesting because he talked a lot about what was going on in Washington when his father was in Congress.
Then you had Minnie Pearl.
We had Minnie Pearl, we had Tandy Rice, who was the first male member of cable. We had Francis Preston, who was a music executive. Kelly Miller Smith was actually received the first Promote Women Award. Kelly Miller Smith and Frank Woods for their work in promoting women. Kelly Miller Smith had a female pastor, and many people in the Baptist church. He was a Baptist minister, First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill. Today, that's a big issue in the Southern Baptist Church. Well, not just the Southern Baptist Church, a lot of Baptist churches.
A lot of
Black
churches have
Black
trouble
Baptist
with
churches
women.
don't have women
Yeah.
in the pulpit. So that's a big issue.
And he was basically a very strong civil rights
Oh,
leader.
most
in
definitely.
Nashville.
Most definitely, very much involved in the civil
And
rights movement.
Coach
in
Ed
Nashville.
Temple.
Coach Ed Temple was
Who
who received he was the coach of the Tennessee State University Tiger Bells, who were Olympic champions. He coached Wilma Rudolph. He also coached some of the Olympic teams. So he was a recipient of the Women Promote Women Award.
And I
But
think
Carol
you were the one-
Simpson, the national news correspondent with ABC, Black female woman, was also one of our speakers. We brought her in. So we had some phenomenal speakers when I was president of cable.
And you, I think, instituted the Promote Women Award.
Yeah, during, but my board
Corporations
did,
and
yeah,
men
for-
did
yeah.
promote women.
right.
When you were working through all these organizations, you began to receive some recognition and honors. I know
Yes,
you received the Molly Todd Cup Award, the Cable Spirit of Leadership Award, 50 Forward, which is for senior citizens, Crowning Achievement Award, the Sage Award. You've been noted in the business Tennessee's Best 101 Warriors in Tennessee, which I think is well deserved.
well, thank you.
And you have been one of the members of the YWCA Academy for Women of Achievement and the National Business Best of the Bar Award. So now what are you doing?
Well, now I'm, as I said, I'm semi-retired and I'm working as a sole practitioner, doing arbitration and primarily probate work. And
How
I'm
many
playing
hours How many hours do you devote to something like arbitration or your practice?
Well, it depends. I'm trying to spend just a minimal amount of time, although, once you take on a case, it has a life of its own. So, but I'm trying to really spend some time on me, and I'm playing tennis 3 days a week. I am line dancing 3 days a week. I'm trying to be a healthy me. So, so between all that, I do some legal work to keep my mind flowing, and also because a lot of the people that I help just need somebody that will hold their hand, and I think that's something that I couldn't always do in some of the positions that I had. So I'm probably representing more individuals than companies at this point.
Tell me about your co-founding of the church with your husband.
Well, in 1981, my husband decided he wanted to start a church. And we started to think about who we were going to call in to help us with this venture. And a lot of them were from different denominations. And I said, we could make this an interdenominational church because it's a Christian church, but so many people from different denominations and backgrounds. Why can't we all be together? And so we founded with 10 other people, Metropolitan Interdenominational Church, which is now 40 some years old, about 42 years old. And we still exist on 11th Avenue North.
Well, I also want to ask about bar participation. You have the Nashville bar and you have the Tennessee bar, and we have the Napier Luby Bar Foundation, which I think also recognized you as a trailblazer, the J.C. Napier Trailblazer Board. What involvement have you had over the years with various bar associations of which you are a member?
Well, when I was finishing law school, or right after I finished law school, the Napier Luby Bar Association was kind of redefining itself. It had existed, but it was re-energizing. And so I belonged to that, and Judge Birch was a member, and a lot of the older Black attorneys who I got to know, and it has been a good way to network and to help to advance the careers of and deal with the diversity inclusion issues with respect to lawyers. I mean, when I graduated law school, there were about 4 Black-owned law firms, and so they couldn't absorb all of us, that were graduating, and so we had to, do something else, and so Napier Luby has been.
Did you ever participate as an officer or head of any of the committees?
I was, I'm still on the foundation board, and I have been on the board of the association. And as I said, I'm still on the foundation board, but it's been a way to network with a lot of different people. I've been involved with the National Bar Association, which I mentioned earlier, and I was on the board of the Lawyers Association for Women as well. I wasn't a founding member. It was founded right after I graduated, and I could have been, but also cable was forming, and Napier Luby was redoing its bylaws, and I said I cannot go to another meeting where people are talking about bylaws. but I was an early member of LAW.
And you mentioned that you were a member of the Harry Phillips Instant Court, which became very beneficial.
Right, it became very beneficial.
Now, you served as a commissioner on the Tennessee Access to Justice Committee.
Yes, the Tennessee Supreme Court created an Access to Justice Commission because they determined that there were so many people coming to the courts that were pro se, in other words, without an attorney, that it was a train wreck, and that they needed to find a way to help people to be able to get legal counsel. And I was on the inaugural Access to Justice Commission, which was a great honor. And it was a statewide group of attorneys who tried to help develop legal clinics, online access, developed a website. We developed a faith-based group, which I chaired at one time. We had a alternative dispute resolution committee, which I chaired at one point. And now the Access to Justice Commission is if you go to the Office of the Courts, Tennessee Office of the Courts, there are just numerous resources for people who do not have attorneys.
That's not the only position that you had that was appointed. You got appointed by the mayor to a committee or a commission in Nashville.
Yes, I've been appointed by about 4 or 5 mayors to the Metro Library Board. It started out with Bill Boner, but it ended up with Bill Purcell, but all the mayors in between reappointed me. I was on the Metro Library Board for 17 years. And during that time, there was a period of retrenchment where we had to deal with limiting hours and closing libraries. And then later, we had a period of renaissance when we built the new downtown library. And we our board hired Donna Nicely, who was done. And she was the leadership person. I was on the board with Margaret Ann Robinson was the chair, and we just had a delightful time working on building that library.
Renaissance in our
city. Yeah, and so that is a crowning achievement. I'm very proud that my name is on the plaque in the front of the library. But that was a wonderful experience. It just, I was on one of the committees that helped to decide what art went in the grand reading room and on the front door, and it was a wonderful.
Now the mayor's liked you because you also got appointed to the Metro Civil Service.
Yes, I was still on the library. My mother was a librarian, as I said, so I love libraries. My first job was in the library, so I've always loved libraries. And Bill Purcell wanted to take me off the library board and put me on the Civil Service Commission. I said, but I love the library. So he said, but I need you on the Civil Service Commission. So I said, oh, okay. He said, well, if you don't like it, I'll reappoint you before my term ends to the library board. But I did stay on the Civil Service Commission, and I'm still there. But I realized it was very important as well. I realized I had probably done, I've been involved with a very monumental thing with the libraries, because that's not the only branch that we built during my term. We upgraded a lot of branches during that time. And the civil service handles administrative appeals of civil service employees who are grieved. We also, set policy for civil service employees, and we approve the pay plan for the civil service employees. So it's very important work. And I felt that it was somewhere that I needed to be, and I'm still there. But I also served on the thermal transfer board for a period of time. It no longer exists. And I was also asked to serve on the NES board, which I really wanted to serve on because of my utility background. But at that time, I was at Waller and representing telecommunication companies who had to negotiate pole attachment agreements with NES, and I felt that there would be a conflict of interest, so I didn't do that. But I would have certainly enjoyed having served on the NES board.
You're still on the Civil Service?
I'm still on the Civil Service Commission.
Well done. Tell us now about your involvement with Fisk. Went to college there, but that didn't end your involvement.
That's right. I have to say I love Fisk University. I got a stellar education there, as well as where I met my husband. But I have served as president of the Nashville Fisk Club, and then later as general counsel of the General Alumni Association, which is the National Alumni Association. And then I served as the chair of the Alumni Association, which brought with it a seat on the Board of Trustees. So I served on the Board of Trustees during the term of Hazel O'Leary. And we had a lot of challenges during that time, which we overcame, and it was a very wonderful experience. And I also continue to serve as the class agent for my class, which is the person who organizes the class and helps plan the class reunions and so forth. So that's been a labor of love, and I'm currently working on planning our 50th reunion in 2024. And after that, after 50 years, I'm going to resign.
Well, I think that they must have appreciated you because you've received the Distinguished Alumni Award for service from Fisk University. And you have also, I think, told me that you were on the advisors to the Vanderbilt Law School.
I was. In fact, I served 2 different terms on the advisory board of Vanderbilt Law School. And on that board, we really, we weren't a governing board, but we talked, they gave us updates on the law school, and we tried to help them to understand some things that we felt that law students should be taught to really succeed in the real world.
You've done, with your radio background, you've also been involved with the Nashville Public Radio.
That's right. As a matter of fact, when I started on the library board, the library owned that license to WPLN. And while I was still on the board, it transitioned into an independent organization. So when it transitioned, I was on the first board as when it became an independent organization.
That was a big step.
Yeah, and I was involved in hiring the first, executive director.
You've been on the board of United Way.
Been on the board of United Way, yes.
And,
Early on.
and Inroads.
Inroads Nashville is an organization that helps African-American students to get internships in corporate America, and I was on that board.
So I think I've had you kind of tell us a little bit about your past and current activities. Are you presently involved in any activities that I haven't mentioned yet?
Well, just recently, because of current events, I became a board member of the Tennessee Freedom Circle, which is an organization that is working with other partners to on the abortion issue. There's been some strict anti-abortion laws passed that criminalizes the doctors who might perform abortions, and it has limited the access of women really to care that they might need, even if they want their children and they maybe had a miscarriage or something. The doctors may be confused about whether that's an abortion. So we are working to create some exceptions to that law. As a matter of fact, last legislative session, at a time when it may have been unlikely, we were able to get an exception passed for the life of the mother. It's not worded as well as we would like it to be, but it's a step. So we're working incrementally to reverse those repressive laws.
Are there some projects that you have yet to accomplish besides writing your autobiography?
Yeah, well, yeah, that is one thing I really want to work on, writing. Maybe some little vignettes, memoirs, so forth. I have some things that I need to clean out, documents and at home that I need to work on getting organized. Because I understand that I tell everybody your children don't want that stuff. So you need to clean it out. You need to purge. I'm working on that. I'm also, I would, if the right opportunity were to come to me, I would be interested in serving on a for-profit corporate board.
I think you'd be an excellent choice. Now, before you get this opportunity, what do you envision retirement looks like? Because you're not retired in any sense of the word.
Well, I just like to stay busy, I think. I always have. And I remember one of my college, not my college, one of my high school teachers said to me, Denise, they called me Denise in high school, don't spread yourself too thin, because I always was in all these extracurricular activities, but I I still like to travel, and there's some places in the world that I haven't been yet that I still would like to go to. But I like to stay busy. But at least now I'm doing the things that I want to do on my time. I mean, I give a lot of legal referrals. If someone asks me to take a case and I don't want to do it, or it's interfering with my life, I'll just refer it to someone else. And so I am living my best life right now.
And 10 years from now, when you might be retired, what do you envision it will look like?
Well, I envision that I would still be involved in civic activity. I will still certainly be involved with family. Two of my grandchildren were here for the month of July, and we had a delightful time. So, you know, I visit them for birthdays and dance recitals and all kinds of things like that. And I will continue to do that. And I will definitely spend a lot of time with family. And so that's a joy and delight to me, and a blessing.
As a final question, what would you say to those young people who are considering a career in the law?
I would say that a career in the law is an excellent, well, first, let me just say the training in the law, a law degree is an excellent background for anything you want to do, be it an entrepreneur, a lawyer, a judge, a journalist, a business person, a civic leader, a politician. Having that background of knowing how to research and present yourself is an excellent background for anything that you want to do. Now, if you want a career in the law, I would say decide what you want to do. Don't do something because you think that's just the hip thing to do, or everybody is pushing you that way. I've seen too many people who maybe are partners in large law firms that are unhappy because that's not what they want to do. But they thought that was the pinnacle to do that, so they did it. And so I think it's important for you to want to do it. You know, I hope that, you know, some of the things that I have done in my career have helped others to move forward. I'm so excited that there are, you know, African-American female partners in a lot of firms now. There are women partners in a lot of firms now. There are women who are CEOs of corporations. There are, you know, there's a lot more opportunities. So I think that you need to decide what you want to do. Don't do it for somebody else. And because there's so many different things that you can do or use a law degree for.
I want to thank you, Denise Billye Bowers Sanders, for being an outstanding trailblazer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.